Hello, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace. This is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And we are here to bring you guys some intense topics, I guess. Yours is an intense topic.
Mine is certainly an intense topic. There are some, big, I don't know if they'd be called firsts. They're accomplishments, maybe, for the show.
Really?
This is my longest script I've ever had.
Really?
Yeah, and it's 9 pages.
Ooh, oh, my God.
And this is the latest we've ever recorded. In fact, I think we're probably going to finish recording this at the time the episode normally comes out. But we'll see how that shakes out. So I'm going to be covering part 2 of the Manson family murders. Robin, what are you going to be covering?
I'm going to cover Pennhurst Asylum.
Right on. So I believe you're going to be going first, and then I'm going to be taking over, correct?
Yeah, I definitely don't have 9 pages, so...
All right, go right ahead.
Right.
Take it away.
All right, so it's been a while since I've covered a mental hospital. It's been a few months, I think, and so I figured I'd go back to one again. This time it's probably one of the more well-known institutions, the Pennhurst Asylum. I think it's more well-known because of what happened there, not so much the haunting stuff. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before.
I have not, which is a good sign because we always have to go back and check all the haunted asylums that we have covered in the past, which we did for this one. It's like, it sounds familiar. However,
it's so familiar for me because I've heard about it a lot and I've watched documentaries on it.
You're also watching Ghost Adventures right now, so
I am
I'm sure
watching Ghost
they
Adventures
went
right
there
now.
and Zach Bagels got possessed by a demon that liked his tattoos.
Maybe, I don't know.
I hate him. I hate how fake that show is so much.
But yeah, so I'm going back to do another asylum. Pennhurst Asylum is said to be the most haunted mental hospital in Pennsylvania, but then again, I'm not sure how many asylums there are or were in Pennsylvania. It could be the only one, hence being the most haunted one, so I wanted to throw that skepticism of the phrase most haunted.
I was going to say,
there.
How does it hold up to the most haunted asylum from all the other 50 states? Is it like first 50?
I don't know. A lot of pages that I was looking through was saying that this is like the craziest, scariest, most haunted one. But obviously that's going to be opinion, you know. It's so strange how people make these lists, and I really can't say if this is more haunted than any other ones that I've covered. All I know is that the atrocities that happen there with the patients and things like that are absolutely horrible.
Right. Like, how do you measure the awfulness of a place? Is it by, quality of ghosts or quantity of ghosts? Or, awfulness of atrocities
Quality
committed there by
quantity.
humans? Exactly. It's really hard. But, you could have one really good ghost, but then 1,000 really mediocre ghosts, and, 1,000 are still going to be scary. You don't know. And it's all personal opinion.
We should watch that, the 13 Ghosts movie.
You want to watch that?
On if that's on Amazon Prime. We should watch that movie.
We can check that out. I'm cool with that.
All right, so going into the actual topic here. So the Pennhurst State School and Asylum was originally opened as the Eastern Pennsylvania Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic. So what the fuck with the names, right? It was constructed between 1903 and 1908 in Spring City, Pennsylvania. Its original buildings were 2 stories and made of red bricks, and it's really nice on the outside. Even now, even though it's pretty dilapidated, it's really nice design on the outside. Granite and terracotta trimmings, and it was on about 634 acres of land, which is a lot of land, right? It would eventually grow, though, to 1,400 acres, which is over double the size.
I was going to say, that's over twice the size.
There were also tunnels that were built that connected the buildings. The tunnels connected between the buildings to transport patients. And these tunnels were designed to be fireproof to protect them against any potential fires that could happen, which I think is interesting. But if the house or building or whatever sets on fire, doesn't the smoke and stuff go into the tunnels and then you choke out anyway?
No, it rises. That's why they have you crawl.
That makes sense. Okay. Obviously, I didn't pay attention in school when they taught you to drop. What is it? Stop, drop, and roll. That's the thing.
Yeah,
right?
Clearly.
All right. So around the main buildings were a number of smaller cottages, and then to house residents, they also had a number of dormitories, which were pretty small, but they did have larger day rooms for residents so that they could exercise in and interact with each other, you know. Though seemingly opulent on the outside, the inside didn't have quite as much flair. Like you see the outside and you think it's going to be amazing and great, and then once you get in, it's crap, you know.
I was gonna say.
It's nothing special. It was to be operated as a state-funded and operated facility to house those that were unable to function in quote-unquote normal society. I hate when people
because society's so messed up. How can you call it normal?
This included those with physical and mental disabilities, as well as any physical or psychological abnormalities. The mute, deaf, and blind were some of the people that they would leave in these types of institutions, and institutions like these all over the country. Even further, those that had quote-unquote offensive habits or quote-unquote imperfect speech may have found themselves there as well.
So if you stuttered or farted too much, they're going to send you one of these places?
If you stutter or offensive habits, maybe you touch yourself too much or something like that, you know?
There's no way I would have survived in this society.
Oh my God. Overall, it was whoever they didn't find to fit into people's so-called perfect lives just got left here to be classified as either an imbecile or insane, mentally healthy or epileptic, and then they even categorized them by their dental health too. So if you had nice teeth, you had crappy teeth, or you had treated teeth, like they'd worked on it or something. And I find that to be totally strange, but that's how they categorize people.
Okay.
This is 1908, so...
Yeah, so they're just, making shit up.
They originally intended to offer rehabilitative services and programs, but despite their good intentions, services actually offered were far from productive. It took in its first patient on November 23rd, 1908. This patient is many times just simply referred to as patient number 1.
Not patient 0?
But no, because it's the first one.
Because there's no virus here. I got it.
Though school services were advertised, there weren't really many who got to enjoy those supposed services due to the nature of the residents, because they're all so different in their capabilities and things like that. Lessons did tend to get out of hand. During class time, obviously you're going to have the kids that cannot focus or they can't talk as well as other kids or things like that. Any people that couldn't control themselves often came to experience a great deal of abuse because they didn't know any other way to control these people. It probably didn't help that this place was underfunded and struggled to keep their day-to-day things running. They also had their coal and supplies delivered by train directly to them, so I feel like they should have traded off resources. Why are we spending so much money to build this railroad track that'll deliver stuff to us instead of just investing into their services and getting more help and doctors and nurses and stuff like that? It's weird, so crazy that
I can see them wanting to have a stop specifically for them to get stuff delivered, but at the same time it's I don't know, was that the wisest choice at the time?
I don't think so. I think that's so weird. 1913 saw the creation of the Commission for the Care of the Feeble-Minded. I don't think that would fly in today's society. There's no way we would get away with naming a whole entity something after the feeble-minded.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
Not PC.
Not only not PC, but it's you just don't put people into asylums for that anymore.
Yeah.
It's we don't know how to treat someone who's deaf or can't speak, so we'll put them in an asylum. It's no, that's not how you do things with human beings anymore.
But this commission deemed disabled individuals as quote-unquote unfit for citizenship and a quote-unquote menace to the peace.
A menace to the peace?
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't understand. This mentality back then, you know? It's so different.
Were they fucking Spider-Man and these people are J. Jonah Jameson? I've never heard the word menace used except in reference to Spider-Man by J. Jonah Jameson. So
people
that's
were
absurd.
trash. I just think that these people were trash back then, and didn't really know how to handle things, so they kind of...
They demonized the people they didn't know how to handle.
Right.
Like, there must be something wrong with them. Otherwise, we'd be horrible human beings for locking them up and treating them like this.
So the government made these institutions the ones responsible for keeping all of these individuals away from the general population for the quote-unquote safety of the public. Oh, I can't even. So, oh yeah, did I also tell you that they kept them from reproducing as well?
That's so fucked up.
Yeah, so it's just mind-blowing. They divided these buildings also into an educational and industrial group, and then a custodial group. So it's messed up. This whole situation's so weird. And that's the government that was like, this is what we're doing. So it's just so crazy. All right. So as with entities like mental institutions and jails and others of the like, they started getting overpopulated because there's only so much space, but people are gonna keep saying like, we'll take these people, take these people, take these people. Pennhurst started getting pressured into taking more than just those that were originally designated to be patients, the type of people that they thought they were going to take in at first. So they started getting pressured into housing immigrants and criminals and orphans, and so it just escalated into this huge thing. They started just taking in all the people in society that people considered undesirables. And it's so crazy.
Mixing people that have any form of handicap with, like, criminals is so bizarre. Like, I don't understand how you can say, like, well, these are all people that I just don't want to think about, therefore we can put them all in the same place. Like,
yeah.
That is
people
awful.
I can understand that they didn't know what else to do, but people were pieces of crap back then, and we're just like, just take them. I don't even, whatever. So, all right. In 1930, an upper campus was built on the property, becoming what would be known as the female colony, and that was to separate the men from the women, which is their attempt to prevent procreation between the patients, because they didn't want any of these undesirables to procreate. I think that's so... This whole place just blows my mind.
The people that made that decision are pretty undesirable, in my opinion, so...
So the institution had such a large population, it kind of ran as its own little city, all the residents performing the necessary tasks to kind of keep their society running, so they all had their own different jobs to do. By the 1960s, it was home to about 3,000 people, which is about 900 more than the supposed maximum capacity. And this place had a whole bunch of buildings on it. It was like a campus, right? And it was still overpopulated. It's just crazy. In 1968, there was a short 5-part TV series about Pennhurst, and for many, it was the first that they'd ever even heard of this place. It was like on ABC or something like that. And I remember having not watched this at the time because I wasn't born, but I have seen bits and pieces of it. This TV show obviously did not shine the institution in the finest light because, so this reporter went in there and they were like, this is absolutely unbelievable, all the conditions that these people live in. So the conditions the patients were put in were absolutely atrocious.
So it's like Joe Exotic was running the place?
This is worse than Joe Exotic, I'm sure. It was horrible.
Those people were in pretty awful conditions, too. That's the only reason I say that.
So there were some people chained to adult-sized cribs, and there were children locked in cages. There was obviously evidence of abuse and neglect. Apparently, if a patient bit a doctor more than once, they were sent to have their teeth removed so it wouldn't happen again. Even though this TV series was aired in 1968, the Asylum wasn't closed until December 9th, 1987.
Wow.
So that's within your lifetime.
They were they were opened to treat epileptics, which are people who have seizures.
Yeah.
And they would remove their teeth if they bit the doctor more than once. Like, that is bizarre.
its closure came after an intense legal dispute filed by a former resident. This resident reported intense physical, emotional, and psychological abuses at the hands of the nurses and caregivers. Apparently, those in power were pretty sick people because not only were they okay with hurting people, but they would manipulate other patients into hurting each other.
That's fucked up.
Yeah. There was even a doctor there at one point named Dr. Jesse Fear. Okay, his last name was fucking Fear.
That's messed up.
He would put patients of normal intellect in with those with, like, severe mental deficiencies and isolate them from anyone else. So
he was performing experiments.
Yes. And so he would put this person in with them, and it would drive them to the point of insanity, which was like a form of torture into submission, because he just wanted to control all these people, right? He would also inject patients with a chemical forcefully, I might add. It wasn't like a type of, hey, we're going to give you this shot type thing. It was like, put him down.
Yeah, hold him down and we'll inject him.
This chemical induced severe pain as a form of punishment. And the teeth pulling thing was also this doctor's idea.
Wow. Dr. Fear. I can't believe that's his actual name and he didn't change it to that.
I don't know. It's so... Oh my gosh. So when confronted about the injection, he was only given a 30-day unpaid suspension.
Wow.
But the patient was in so much pain that he was like banging his head against the ceiling or something like that, or the wall, because it hurt so bad. And he's like, I can't believe he hit his head from that. Like, oh my God, what a piece of shit.
I was going to say, if it was the ceiling, it must have given him the ability to jump really high, too.
He drank some Red Bull at Game Wings.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, any patients that were remaining in the institution after its closure were transferred to other locations or completely discharged, leaving the building mainly abandoned. Some say that the main building was abandoned for like 25 years, but I'm not sure how accurate that is. I've seen documentaries on Pennhurst, not about the hauntings, because I don't know why. I've heard about it so many times, but not about it being haunted ever.
Because it was just such an awful place.
Yeah, but I've watched documentaries about how horrible and cruel the conditions these patients lived in before it was closed down, and it's absolutely awful. The underfunding probably helped in the lack of care for the patients. Not enough helping hands or supplies. It wasn't uncommon to walk through this place and just smell dirty diapers, piss, sweat, mold.
Gross.
There would be like vomit and crap all over the floor. Like, it was disgusting. It was a horrible, horrible situation to be in, and residents were just extremely neglected and understandably extremely unhappy to be there. The good thing that does come from the legacy of Pennhurst, though, are the reforms that came afterwards. There were large changes in how society treated those with special needs. Not completely, as we've seen in our lifetime, how many more laws have had to be passed to provide better care for those with special needs. I mean, like ADA stuff. All that stuff, I think, happened during my lifetime.
Right.
Where with ramps and things like that, and
having anywhere be accessible to someone that's not able to...
Yeah, that's in my lifetime. I remember when I was working at the hotel I think I used to work at. Okay. Long time ago. But we had to start putting in ramps and stuff and constructing all that there. And that's, I mean, that all that stuff's in my lifetime. This was 1986 or whatever
87, yeah.
When it closed down, right? So it's just crazy. But it was a start. After all this, changes started to happen. Something has to get the ball
rolling, right?
These days, Pennhurst is known by different names. So there's like the Pennhurst State School and Hospital and just Pennhurst Asylum. Those are just a couple of the things it's called. And it said that because of the amount of abuse individuals experienced while within the limits of the institution, ghosts are everywhere on the premises. There have been many reported incidents of paranormal activity. Those that have visited the school areas of the buildings say that they have witnessed full-body apparitions. What do they call them in Ghostbusters?
Like free-form, full-floating apparition. I'm not sure if that's the right thing, but that's just what came to mind at 3 a.m.?
There's been one reported in Quaker Hall where paranormal researchers caught the shadowy figure of a little girl. They believe that those are said to be the spirits of students, like student patients from the past, like the kids that went there for school, things like that.
Okay.
Many visitors have felt a cold breeze brush by them, while others report things moving on their own or even being thrown directly at them.
Now, are we talking about things actually thrown directly at them, or like
we just
Ghost Adventures,
we just
where the
watched
guy
an
claims
episode.
something was thrown directly at him because he heard a noise somewhere in the room?
Oh, I just started laughing because his scream is so funny. Anyway, in the mental hospital section of the asylum, there have been the sounds of crying and screaming from both children and adults. It's like an echo of the pain they suffered, I think. You know what I mean? Considering, okay, you know me in my time thing where it's just echoes through time.
It's scarred the timeline.
Yeah, so doors can be heard slamming and whispers heard throughout the asylum. Apparently, a number of EVPs have been recorded by different investigation teams that have gone there. There have been voices saying, "Go away," or "I'll kill you," and "Why won't you leave?" Those types of things.
We're trying to reach you for your car's extended warranty.
The ghost of Dr. Fear is also said to haunt the Mayflower building, which I think is the main building on the campus. And some investigators claim to encounter this ghost and recording strange EVPs.
His name is Dr. Fear. Did you confirm?
Did
you confirm he's a real human being?
He's a real human being.
Oh my God.
Because I was on one site and it brought up this Dr. Fear and I was like, who the fuck is Dr. Fear? And I was like, this has to be some fiction that they've created. But then I Googled the name and it came up with like, him having been suspended. There's news articles. It's just, what? How is this a real person, right? So, the bodies of many patients were never accounted for, and authorities assume that they're buried somewhere on the 1,400-acre property, right? When investigators asked the ghost of Dr. Fear what he did with the bodies, a voice was recorded saying, "I burned them." And
I'm just so skeptical because of all the ghost adventures you've had on our TV that I've been trying to ignore, that I hate so dearly.
Though, some things, like EVPs, freak me the fuck out. When it's like a whisper, it's a tiny, tiny, tiny voice, that they have to turn it so high up to hear. It just freaks me out, like that episode, I think you did one with EVPs.
Yeah, I did EVPs once, yeah.
Yeah, they freak me out. I'll
do
me
EVPs
chills.
Again sometime soon, the next couple weeks maybe.
Yeah, they give me chills. I don't know why, they scare me. So military took over the upper campus where it was the female colony before. They took over the upper campus in 1986 and they put it to use as a veterans home and a veterans center.
That's good.
In 2000,
put veterans in a haunted place. Like, I'm sure they don't have any PTSD
I
or anything.
I wonder if the upper campus isn't haunted.
I think this whole place is haunted, to be honest.
Anyway, in 2016, the VA did start tearing down some buildings on the upper campus. As of 2010, the administration building has reopened as a haunted house. During Halloween, they have like haunted house stuff. I don't know. Like an attraction for those who just want to go for the scares. You can even go on your own ghost hunts from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m.
So you can just go there and just do whatever you want?
No, you have to book tickets and then they have one person there.
Oh, it's like ghost tours.
Yeah, kind of.
It's like if they were to just say, like, go where the fuck you want,
but you
don't
do
die.
an investigation while you're there. So you set up all your equipment and you do all that stuff. It's understandably successful, the whole haunted house thing, but also controversial because it's based on real people, real patients that were there, so it's kind of disrespectful, and I totally understand that. The railroad tracks that went through the campus have been removed. They're part of like a trail now that you
Rails to trails. That's what they called it back where I'm from, where they turned like old railroad tracks no one was using into bike paths and stuff like that.
You can walk and bike on it and stuff like that. It's like right along the river. It's kind of cool. In March 2020, so this year, demolition began on a number of buildings on the property, but many of the original buildings still remain. It's named #1 haunted attraction in the U.S., according to USA Today.
Wow.
And did you know there's also the nearby Limerick nuclear power plant? So that probably doesn't help with all the creepy stuff that happens there.
Do you think you're going to have radiation ghosts or something? Like, if it's operating fine, then there's no worries.
I just think it's crazy that there just so happens to be a nuclear power plant there nearby. I was just like, what?
I guess. You might be reading too much into that, though.
I don't know. So, when it comes to ghosts, there are certain things that supposedly, okay, I'm not a paranormal investigator. I don't know any of that stuff. I'm not a scientist, but I've read, heard, watched, listened to a lot of different things, and certain energy, like when a house is built under a lot of power lines, it said that ghosts manifest a little bit more because of the types of energies and things like that.
Can't you also develop cancer if you're under a power line?
I think so. There's weird stuff that happens when you're under.
It might just be a myth.
A lot of it probably. It's probably something MythBusters needs to do.
Or it's something that the electric company told me was a myth.
But
PG&E.
Oh God. But I think something like that might affect an area or a location as well.
Right.
Because it's just these different energies, energy field type things. I don't know. Okay. But I think nuclear power plant's pretty weird to have and then have this super crazy building there too. I don't know.
I would rather combine a haunted place with a nuclear power plant a little bit further away than a nuclear power plant and, I don't know, a nest of spiders or something. That's my second Spider-Man reference, and I didn't realize my brain was going to do that. So. But yeah, radioactive spiders, please bite me.
What?
Really good.
What
topic.
if you turn into, like, a creature that looks like something out of The Fly?
You know he does turn into a spider in the cartoon, in the animated series. I think it happens in the comic books, too.
Shut the front door.
And the guy who, like, goes through his blood and figures out how to cure him is the doctor who becomes Lizard Man or whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, so fun Spider-Man facts for you all. But yeah, that was a really good topic, Robin. Good job. Haunted asylums are always very interesting because usually the human atrocities kind of explain why you can totally see why that area would be haunted.
Yeah.
So it's a shame, but I'm glad you covered it. Good stuff.
Thanks. Now we're going to get into more human atrocities.
But before we do that, we're going to take a quick commercial break. All right, and we are back. So this week, I am continuing the saga that began last week, known as the Manson Family Murders. This is officially Manson Family Murders Part 2. Now, I know earlier in the episode I stated this is the longest script I have ever had, and that is true. But I should probably tell you right now that this is going to be the second of 3 installments for the Manson Family Murders.
Yeah, when he was like, oh man, I gotta stop, there's too much.
It was like 2 a.m. and I'm like, I haven't even gotten to the fucking trial yet, and there's so much crazy shit that happened, so...
I just got to the point, I was like, I'm sitting here watching Letterkenny, waiting for you to be done.
So essentially what this is going to break down to, and I had the feeling it might happen, is that the first episode that happened last week is the history of Charles Manson, essentially. Like, this is what led up, and then I stopped when he met Tex, because that's when the family was really starting to be built. This episode is going to be about building the family out, and then the crimes they committed, and then we will stop after what we all know to be the Manson family murders. So I'm going to get through the murders, and before I get into the actual detective work that went into figuring shit out, and the complications that arose, and all the things that happened with that, and then the eventual trial, and all the bizarre shit that happened there, we're going to stop. So I'm going to stop after the murders, so I can leave you folks on a wonderful, happy note, and I will let you know when there's trigger warnings for anything, because some of these details are quite gruesome, as I'm sure most of you know. Now, one of the things I did to prepare this week for this script is watch the 1976 dramatic reenactment known as Helter Skelter. My mom has always talked about this, about how it just creeped her the fuck out. It's basically it basically compiled a bunch of the facts that happened and then brought in actors to play all the different people involved in the case, the subsequent trial.
The guy that actually plays Charles Manson, I was like, you're terrifying.
He looks just like, yeah, dude. I put a few observations regarding Helter Skelter. One, it's a miniseries, so it's 3 hours long. I think you can rent it for like $4 on Amazon Prime.
Kind of like The Stand.
No, The Stand is so much longer. Oh my god.
Or It.
It is like 4 hours. So, anyways, the guy who plays Charlie Manson really did look like him and was kind of terrifying.
He had crazy eyes.
He does the crazy eye thing really well. And it is, to be honest, pretty cheesy and pretty boring at times, but if you like true crime, you'll probably really dig it. All that said, I thought it was really good, and I definitely was very intrigued to learn some of the details I had no idea about it. So if you want to check it out, go for it. It definitely has the same problem that I typically have with most documentaries or reenactments of this. It doesn't really cover Charles Manson leading up to what happened. It's just like, yeah, crazy inmates, or ex-inmate, ex-con Charles Manson. It's like, okay, cool, like, kind of buried the lead there. It's like you just introduced Darth Vader without telling me about the younglings.
I think that's why I appreciated your episode last week, because we kind of learned about him growing up, and so it was pretty cool.
Yeah, now the world has episode of Scaryish 132, so if anyone ever needs to know about what Charles Manson was like leading up, now you know. But like I mentioned last week, we left off with the fateful meeting of Charles Watson, a.k.a. Tex, and Charles Manson. And that's where we're going to pick up. So Tex was pretty close with Charlie pretty quickly. And Charlie even took him with when he went to go do stuff with the Hollywood celebrities, not just the girls who he usually brought around to sing backup. He took him with to go borrow a car because they were going to take a trip to the north part of the West Coast. He was picking that car up from that record executive who actually didn't like Charlie. I'm guessing Dennis Wilson pulled some strings and convinced him to lend the car. And this, of course, means that Tex is now aware of where Terry Melcher lived at the time. Terry Melcher being the record executive who Charlie thinks hold the keys to the kingdom of Hollywood. And he's the only one in the family that would know, aside from Charlie, where Terry Melcher lives. And as long as we're talking about folks that were quote-unquote special in the eyes of Charles Manson and the ranks of the family, it's worth mentioning one of the earliest followers of Manson was a woman named Susan Atkins. So Susan herself had a rough life. Her mom passed away from cancer when she was about 15, and she was actually working and going to high school at the same time to support her younger brother and her father, because her father seemed to be unable to hold down a job. Like you would expect, she started acting out, which is not a big surprise. Stuff like booze, drugs, sex. She eventually tried unsuccessfully to take her own life. Her aunt and uncle wound up taking her in, similar to Charles Manson, who also was taken in by his aunt and uncle.
Yeah.
Except her aunt and uncle, when they realized just how much of a wild child she was, were like, fuck this. And they sent her back to her dad.
Wow.
When she turned 18, she ran away to San Francisco. And things didn't really go well there. She found some low-paying jobs that she couldn't hold down, and also a bunch of abusive boyfriends. She wound up taking a road trip with one of those deadbeats to Oregon in a stolen car. Again, very similar to Charles Manson.
Wow.
Along the way, they stopped and robbed a gas station. Very similar to Charles Manson as well. And she gets arrested and spends 3 months in jail up in Oregon. Here is one of my favorite descriptions of Susan Atkins from all the places I could find. It is from the Life and Times of Charles Manson. Quote, Susan wasn't beautiful, but she was nice looking and exuded aggressive sexuality.
Wow.
So I think if we're translating this to 2020, say I went out with a chick and I came home and my friends were like, yo, dude, what's she like? I'd be like, she's not gorgeous, but she's kind of like dirty hot with big dick energy. Because it's really hard. It's really hard to describe something like exuding aggressive sexuality.
Big dick energy. It's just the
Hi, I'm Susan. I'm going to hold you down and blow you. You cool with that? Doesn't matter. It's hard to figure out what exactly they're trying to say there.
I think it's something where I'm sure she was just really forward.
Right.
Or just everything was maybe a sexual innuendo, or
I think things were just direct.
Or she just liked to dress super skimpy. And
they kind of all did at this point, especially younger girls who were into the hippie lifestyle. But anyways, her path crosses with Charles Manson, and she's like a dancer at a club at one point, and she instantly falls for this dude. Something about batshit crazy eyes and mediocre guitar playing, and what must have been just a magical dick on this dude. Just had people lining up to follow him, especially young girls.
Manson?
Yeah.
Okay.
She wasn't the only one. There was also a 19-year-old girl named Pat Krenwinkel. Her parents divorced when she was in high school, and she was from California. She then went to live with her mother in Alabama.
That's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference. And it said that she decided to move back to California because she hated two things in particular about Alabama. Everyone there called her Yankee, and
because she's from California.
Because she's just not from the South. And segregation, because there was still segregation in Alabama, and she thought, wow, this is fucked up. I don't want to be around this. So she went back to California, which I believe is surprising that she wasn't a fan of this, considering how these things are going to end up. But she moves back to California and she winds up living with her half-sister, who was older than her, and her half-sister's 9-year-old son, so her 9-year-old nephew. And while there, it's pretty much a shit show. Her sister's really into drugs. The 9-year-old is a wild child and is kind of a fucking asshole from what I can understand. And through a mutual friend, Pat's older sister is asked if some dude can come stay at her house for a few days, just needs a place to crash, and she's like, sure, dog, mi casa, su casa, because she's into that lifestyle. And the guy shows up, and he's got crazy eyes and a guitar, and sure enough, it's Charles Manson. And he notices how messed up the home life is right away. The older sister's the druggie, the 9-year-old's an asshole. So he focuses his energy on 19-year-old Pat. That is his target. He's only there for a few days, but he's basically banging away at Pat the whole time.
Jeez.
Like right away he gets in there, and it's apparently consensual. He convinces her in those few days to run away with him and drive around the country and see the world. And she does. A few days after meeting him, she's like, what do I have to lose? Like, I got this new boyfriend, and we're just going to go and, explore the world. So she hops in a car, and they leave. And he makes a quick stop, and he picks up 2 other chicks. And it's at this point Pat realizes very quickly they're also fucking Charlie, and that is not her boyfriend. But she's like, okay, I guess. And she gets over it very quickly and decides she can share him.
I don't know how. He has the charisma to...
It's just like the right time and place. It's the summer of love, baby. Everyone's fucking each other. So
What
she's just
the
like,
hell?
all right, I guess I'm going to go along with it. And Charlie was super happy because aside from recruiting yet another pretty young girl to his family, Pat had a Chevron credit card that her dad would always pay. So no matter how much she charged on it, it's a gas credit card. They still have these things too. It's a credit card, and you can just put your gas on it and like collect rewards and shit like that, and you pay it down, and she has one that her dad pays for. So now he has an unlimited supply of gasoline,
and
basically.
You can't really rack up a bunch of gas, right, where it's like astronomical.
It's not so high that he's not going to pay it because her
Yeah.
dad apparently has money, and because they're estranged, and it's one of the few things he still does for her because he's divorced from her mom. He's like, okay, I'll just pay it.
Oh.
And they're driving all over the fucking place aside from hitchhiking, so Charles Manson views this as like another thing she's bringing to the table. And so these folks grow close, and they become a quote-unquote family, and they were always taking in more people. And think about like any party you've ever been to, or better yet, like organized and hosted. Like it could be a dinner party, or like a house party, or your or someone's birthday party, or maybe you just went to a restaurant and you were the first person there, and you were in charge of getting like a table for everyone that was going.
Yeah.
Like that shit can be a nightmare. Now imagine having like 50 people, Like, you can't even imagine the logistics of trying to have 50 people in your house or at a restaurant together, and that's how big the Manson family gets. They have 50 people consistently, and they're just there every single day. And it's like being right around 50 people, to me, sounds like a fucking nightmare. Like, I know this is supposed to be the summer of love, but, like, I can barely stand, like, a handful of people around me at once, and, like, I get there's plenty of like LSD and meaningless sex, but I don't think that would be enough to ignore me, like make me ignore the fact that I just couldn't stand 4/5 of them at best, So they just like hung out at Dennis Wilson's cabin. They were just allowed to stay there, but the family kept getting bigger and bigger, and they were kind of assholes. So eventually Dennis Wilson, the beach boy, finally comes to his senses, and he's like, Charlie, yo, get the fuck out. And he just tells him to get off his property. He's done with it. Like, he's still gonna be friends with him, kind of, but he wants him to get the hell out and to take his weird cult with him. So the family just leaves, and they wind up wandering onto Los Angeles County Ranch. And it's a big group of them just wandering around this ranch that's typically used to film stuff, and they run into the owner while they're wandering around on his property, which is George Spahn, or Spahn, or however you say it.
Yeah.
And in all fairness, George Spahn was 81 years old and completely blind at the time, but he apparently liked Charlie Manson and the family, and they made a deal that they could stay on his property as long as they worked there, which they actually did for the most part. There's a lot of work to be done on the ranch, and like Tex was pretty good on the ranch.
Well,
so
they did tours and stuff.
yeah,
right?
they did some stuff. And so essentially this guy's 81 years old, and he's just like, you know what, fuck it, I don't care. You can stay here if you want. Like, no one's here anymore. So, like, imagine Charlie basically negotiating with this guy, like, also, these teenagers that are just barely of age are going to bang you whenever you want, and there's drugs. And he's 81, he's like, sounds fucking sweet to me.
So how many kids does Manson end up having?
Oh, I don't know how many kids he winds up having. I haven't gotten to those numbers yet. I'm focusing on the expansion of his quote-unquote family.
Okay.
And then the eventual murders here.
Okay.
So I know he supposedly has 2, but they say in the documentary that I watched, they say, like, and who knows how many more.
Well, yeah, because we watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's about these murders, and Brad Pitt's character goes up to Spawn Ranch, and there's a fuckload of pregnant women. So
Was there a fuckload?
Okay, there were a few. There were a few. Okay, to me that's a lot all at once, you know.
I mean, we have a few friends, but most of them all wind up pregnant.
Yeah, they're all
at the same
pregnant
time,
at the same time. It's so crazy how many got pregnant all at the same time for the second time.
Yeah,
it just blows my mind. Anyway, that's not important right now. What's important is that I just assumed that all those pregnant
kids were his.
Yeah,
they're all
kids
fucking
were his.
each other. So who knows, man?
Okay.
All right. So the family would like lose a member or two, but pick up more. They get to that number of 50. They hold there pretty well until all this shit goes down.
Do they kill people when they leave?
No, they don't kill people for leaving. Like, the people would just wander away like they're hitchhikers. They're vagabonds. So they would move between hippie communes. Like, there was other, like, quote-unquote families. They didn't call themselves that, but there was other places that popped up in the 60s, like in California and, like, New Mexico, in Arizona, where they would just, like, have these communes where people would come live and, like, fuck each other and do a bunch of drugs, and then eventually they'd move to a different one. And, like, they like would exchange members sometimes, and they knew of each other, and I'm actually going to get to that a little bit later. But between 67 and 69, the family grows to 50, and in that time,
69,
Charles Manson would meet a woman named Linda Kasabian. And Linda had gone through a divorce herself with the father of her infant daughter. She's only, I think, 21 when they meet. So she moves away when she has this divorce. She moves away from California to New Hampshire. Then she winds up moving back to California because her ex-husband's like, we should reconcile, please come back. So she comes back. He's living at one of these hippie communes. It's not the Manson family one. They're living in a trailer together, and he wants to buy a boat and sail around the world, and it's just not for her, and their reconciliation kind of just falls apart. So she's figuring out what she's going to do, and she figures her next move is going to be to presumably move back to New Hampshire and live with her mom, which she had been trying to do. And before she can pull the trigger on that plan, a friend of hers comes by and tells her to check out this other commune, which was quote-unquote groovy. Which is not an actual quote. I just hadn't put it into a script yet, and it's the 60s, so I figured I need to do it at least once.
You know what's funny is that it's Bruce Campbell's birthday.
Is it?
On,
Happy birthday,
Monday?
Bruce Campbell.
So Monday was Bruce Campbell's birthday, and he says groovy.
He does.
Sorry. Anyway, random fact.
That's a really good random fact, though. So Linda winds up heading up to Spawn Ranch at the behest of her friend. And she loves the ranch, but she really, really has a crush on this guy named Tex. So she stays at the ranch for a little while and almost immediately started bang-a-ranging with Tex. But not just like the free love hippie bang-a-ranging, like they'd stay up at night and talk about really deep things about life and like their place in the universe and things like that. And she's sleeping in the bed with Tex, too. It's almost like they're together.
Okay.
And Tex tells her you should go back to your other commune because they know the other commune's people and they think that leader over there has money. So he tells her, go back there and bring back $5,000 that they think the guy has.
Okay.
So she goes back, she steals the $5,000, she gets her kid, and she bails. And when she gets back to Spawn Ranch, then she's allowed to meet with Charles Manson for like acceptance into the family. And upon meeting him, almost like immediately, he starts feeling up her legs in a really sexual manner and asking her weird questions about life. And she's creeped out by it. And when it came out during this weird conversation that she has a valid driver's license, he basically stops touching her and tells her, like, okay, cool, you're in. Because, like, a valid driver's license to him is important because so many of them don't have them there and they need to be, like, taken around. And if they get pulled over, they're going to get in trouble. So that's her ticket in, is essentially $5,000 and a valid driver's license. So in 1969, Charlie gets some good news and some bad news because his dream right now is to become a famous musician. So Terry Melcher, despite having previously shown interest, decides against doing business with Charlie Manson regarding his music. He's not going to record an album. He's not going to put his music out. But he's like such an interesting character that the good news that Melcher has is that he thinks it's a good idea to make a documentary about Charlie Manson and his music and the family. Because it's just so bizarre and batshit crazy and interesting at the same time. And realistically, had he not gone crazy, I think that probably would have been a super successful thing. And they started arranging for this to be filmed. And here Charlie is again like an inch away from fame. But while at Spawn Ranch, Melcher watches Charlie get agitated with some drunken stuntman who is also there, which just reminds me of Brad Pitt's character from Once Upon a Time, except that he's not drunk. And they basically get into a fist fight with each other, and that's when Terry Melcher's like, this is fucked. Like, he just pulls everything out of it. He stops the project. He lets Charlie Manson know, like, I'm not working with you anymore. There's no show. There's no music. We're done. Apparently, this is the time where Dennis Wilson, he either hears of or sees the event as well and decides, like, sorry, Charlie, no more. He cuts ties with them, too. So 1969, like the spring of 1969, the early summer of it, they just basically say, like, Charlie, like, we're done with you. Like, it's not going to work out. You're fucking crazy. You self-sabotage yourself all the time, and you just say bizarre stuff. So Charlie is not happy, obviously. He goes up to Terry's house a little bit later once he's cooled down to talk about this. But when he gets there, he's told that he's moved by the current residents. He's basically told, like, he's not here. He doesn't live here anymore. We don't know where he lives now. Please get the fuck off the property. He's just this random hippie dude walking onto, like, this really nice house. And so he leaves. Now, Charlie was never the most stable of human beings in the first place. And his bizarre behavior had certainly been a red flag to a lot of people, which is kind of the reason why none of this worked out. But they didn't really know the half of it. Like, the shit this dude was preaching during those 2 years, from 67 to 69, is nothing they could have ever expected. And sure enough, him being rejected by these Hollywood folks who he was trying to really take in and become one of, seems to really make him take a turn. And he had always preached batshit crazy nonsense, but now that he wasn't going to be famous, he really spiraled, and the family spiraled with him. So Charlie had preached stuff like somehow taking passages out of the Bible and applying them to current times, which has basically happened since the Bible has existed. And he twisted the words to illustrate how there was going to be this war, and he used stuff in Revelations to talk about how there was going to be this war that was greater than all other wars combined, and in much kinder terms than Charles Manson offered. Essentially, it was going to be a race war where the whites would be extinguished by blacks, who would then, for some bizarre reason, offer themselves to the remaining chosen people to be their slaves. So they would eliminate, like, this entire race of people. Then they'd be like, we want someone else to take over and be in charge of us forever. And now
that's the stupidest shit I've ever heard.
It's fucking crazy, dude. And there's a lot of crazy bullshit about this that I could bring up. Like, there's super specific details about all the things he pulled out of these passages and how they all applied to him and how they're all about him and what's going on right now. But it's just a waste of time for you to hear it. Like, you can find it in several places, but, like, you can't even follow it because it's just the ramblings of a deranged mind. One of the most bizarre details is that Charlie would take the family, which at that point would be 144,000 people, which is a very famous number in the Bible. He would take them to, quote, the pit while the war happened, and then when it was over, they would emerge from it, and that's when they would be the chosen people that would take over the world, with Charlie essentially as king of the world. It's almost as like he knew it didn't make sense, because he would refer to himself, and his followers believed that he was the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Jeez.
Because of all the shit he said. But he also referred to himself as the devil, because he's in charge of the pit. He's the ruler of the pit, and he realizes, like, those two things don't really match up. And it's like his followers kind of hear that, but they just tell people as they're inducting them into the family that, like, Charlie's Jesus. Like, that's who Charlie is. Like, and Charlie's going to take over, and, like, the end of times is here, and he's going to protect everyone, and, like, you really need to hear what he has to say. And it's not shocking that Charlie's batshit crazy ideas were involving race war and, like, purification, because one of his personal heroes was Adolf Hitler.
What?
And he spent a lot of time...
And people were okay with him?
Well, like, he didn't really talk to a lot of people about how Adolf Hitler was one of his heroes, because in his earlier life, when he brought it up, people would be like, whoa, this dude's kind of fucked up. Because World War II had ended in 1945. That was only 21 years prior to this, you know? I'm sorry, 24 years prior to this at this point. So when things start coming out after all this shit goes down, people are like, yeah, that dude was like a Nazi sympathizer. He was totally into Hitler. And it's not shocking that he uses some of the same rhetoric that Hitler used, of, like, divisive language to divide up the races, to make them try and, like, fight each other. And Charlie decided that the family needed to relocate from Spahn Ranch to a patch of desert in, I believe, New Mexico, but it might have been another Southwest state. And they needed money to do so. They needed to go somewhere that had a better setup for them to survive the apocalypse, which would be known as Helter Skelter, which was a Beatles song, which Charlie just plucked out of thin air and said, like, Helter Skelter is about the end of the world, and we have to move, but we can't be broke. He decides they're going to collect money, but he's going to go back into his, like, brain of how he's always functioned to collect money. He's going to do it in illegal ways. So he talks to Tex, and he has Tex set up a deal where they're going to tell the drug dealer they're going to sell him 25 kilos of weed, and they're going to ask for $2,500. The drug dealer that they talk to is named Bernard Crow, and he says, I'll give you $2,500, but I want the weed delivered by this day, and until the weed is delivered, I'm going to hold so-and-so hostage, which is one of Tex's friends who's not in the family. So like, cool, that's fine, give us the money. So he does. And then they're just like, okay, well, fuck that guy. And
wow.
So he calls him like, I'm going to murder your friend, guys. Like, I have your friend here, and he describes in like explicit ways how he's going to murder this chick. And he's talking to Charlie Manson. Charlie Manson's like, I don't fucking care. He didn't. Like, he got the money. That's all he wanted. That was the plan. But he didn't really think it out past that. So Crow decides he's going to tell him like, well, one, I'm going to kill her. And two, I'm a Black Panther. So I'm going to go get my friends, and we're going to come and storm Spawn Ranch and kill everyone there. And that triggers Charlie, because he thinks that this is the start of this race war that he's been talking about, and now these people are going to show up and murder him because of what they did. So he is very, very scared. And side note, Crow was bluffing. He was not a Black Panther, but he knew that that would scare someone like Charlie Manson, which it did. So Charlie sets up armed guards because they have all these guns at Spawn Ranch. They have patrols. They're patrolling the border of it 24/7. And so it's essentially like the war is about to start. He's convincing his followers this is going to happen. And now these things are being put into place to prevent people that might show up to kill them, which was a very real threat, you know? So to them, this is a very real thing. And it just like reinforces their belief that Charlie's right about all of this, even though he's responsible for the danger they're in. So Charlie winds up doing something like you would imagine he would do to solve this problem. July 1st, 1969, Charlie takes a family member named T.J. Walleman to Crow's place to supposedly talk and find a resolution, but he takes a gun with him and he tucks it into the back of his pants. And he tells TJ that when they're there, he's going to give him a signal, and he wants TJ to pull the gun from the back of Charlie's pants and then shoot Crow. That's what's supposed to happen, okay? So when they get there, he eventually gives TJ the signal, but TJ's like, nah, dog, like, I'm good. He has second thoughts. He's not going to kill this dude. So Charlie winds up having to do it himself. So he pulls the gun. Sure enough, he murders this dude in his own apartment.
Wow.
And, like, Charlie is so batshit crazy. Like, the war gets named Helter Skelter because he literally believes that him and the Beatles are connected. And the Beatles are sending him messages through their songs to let him know that the war is starting. And he picks everything out of the lyrics the same way he did the Bible about how it's going to be this race war.
Did he have, like, a mental...
Oh, yeah. He's fucking batshit schizophrenic crazy in so many different ways. Like, he decides the Beatles are the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
What?
He connects all these different things. Like, you see the number 4 and there's 4 Beatles. Boom, it's the end of the world. And so when he kills this guy, he kills this Crow, he assumes that, okay, cool, this is going to start the war. Like, people are going to find this Black Panther murdered, and then it's going to start this war. And he's not a Black Panther. He's just some dude who said he was, that Charles Manson has murdered at this point. So he waits for the war to start after July 1st, and it just doesn't happen. And he's already told his followers, like, this summer is the end of the world. Like, we need to be prepared this is going to happen. And like so many doomsday cults that predict the end of the world, the biggest piece of pressure that can be put on someone is the world not ending. So July 1st happens, and he's thinking it's going to come, and he's trying to prepare people. So he starts taking multiple followers from the family and like training them. And he wants them to know they have this power where they can go anywhere they want. So he decides...
Like Jumper?
No, not like Jumper. They're not Hayden Christensen in another horrible movie. So what he decides to he's going to do to show them that they can do whatever they want and go wherever they want is they wait for nighttime. He makes them all dress in dark clothing, and he takes them to random houses all over Los Angeles, and they just break in. And because people would have their windows or doors unlocked back then, because people never thought that something like this could happen, they would break in and they would do what they called creepy crawlies. This is something my mom talks about, that it creeped her out beyond belief when she heard about it. And they would basically get down on their tummies and they'd like crawl around the house. They'd like go into people's bedrooms and like lay on the ground next to their bed. And he would have them do it for like hours while they slept, just to show like you're in their house and they don't know. You can do whatever you want right now. You can do whatever you want to them. And then like the next phase of it was they would move shit around in their house. they would like rearrange their furniture as quietly as possible and put like a dining room table in the living room and like a couch in the bedroom that they're sleeping in.
So they're pulling poltergeist type stuff.
They're doing really scary shit.
Oh
and
my
like
God.
They're doing it all over the place. Like one of the craziest things is that one of the break-ins happened to Michelle Phillips, who is a singer for the Mamas and Papas. Which, if you don't know who the Mamas and Papas are, if you've ever heard the song California Dreamin', that's them. All the leaves are brown and the sky is gray. Robin's shaking her head. She's never heard that.
No.
I hate her so much. I guarantee you heard it, but you just don't know it.
Oh, okay.
So, in less than a month, from July 1st to the beginning of August, Manson has decided that the family needs more money. The $2,500 they stole from Crow isn't enough. And this time, they turn to an ally of the family. So, a guy named Gary Hinman had previously allowed family members to stay at his home. He was friendly to them. He was a PhD student at UCLA, so clearly he had some money. And he had discussed arranging a trip to Japan in 1969 with the family, which they took to mean he must have a lot of money. So on July 25th, 1969, 4 members of the family, Bruce Davis, Mary Brunner, Susan Atkins, and Bobby Bausalili, I don't know if I said that right, probably not, I'll just go with Bobby from now on. They drive to Hinman's place, and he's like, oh, what's up, guys? Like, come in. And almost immediately after entering his home, they basically say, like, we want all your money right now. And he tells them, I don't have any money here, so I don't know what you guys are talking about. So Susan Atkins holds him at gunpoint while everyone else searches his place. And sure enough, they can't find anything. He doesn't have any cash there. And so at one point while they're searching through his house, Hinman grabs Susan Atkins and the gun and tries to get it away from her. And while they're struggling, Bobby jumps in and they overpower Hinman together. Then after that, they beat the shit out of this dude for a few hours, demanding that he turn over his money, which he must have. But he still just insists he does not have anything. So he tells them, like, I'll sign my cars over to you. So they go and they get the titles to this guy's car, and he signs them over legally. So now, well, like, obviously it's not legal, but if you were just to look at the piece of paper, they now own his 2 cars. So, and they're worth more than they thought he had. They assumed he had $1,000 in his home, and the cars he's given them are worth together more than $1,000. And they beat the shit out of this dude, and he insists he doesn't have anything else. And they're just like, we should just call Charlie. This seems pretty good. We got 2 cars. And they're like, all right, gang, like, job well done. So they call Charlie, and he's fucking pissed. He's like, he has to have cash. He's lying. So he tells Bruce, who's still there, who's the driver, come back to Spawn Ranch and pick me up and bring me there. So he does. And when Bruce picks him up, Charles Manson brings his sword. So when he gets back to Hinman's house, Hinman's just confused because Charles Manson had been nice to him and he thought he was charismatic. And he's basically like, what the fuck, bro, Chacho? Like, I've been good to you guys. And Charlie replies to him by slashing the left side of his face. He almost takes his ear off in this vicious slash. And he tells him, like, you're going to give us everything you have. And he insists that he must have at least $1,000 in the house. He tells him there's no cash, take anything of value. He thinks of every single possession he can give to the Manson family, which still isn't enough. Charlie's upset. But he tells Bruce to take him back to the ranch. He tells the rest of the folks to stay there. He gives them orders. So for the rest of Friday night, all of Saturday, and all of Sunday, they beat this man mercilessly.
What the fuck?
While they're beating him, the girls are begging with him like they're his friends to give them more money to, quote, end his suffering. And at some point, Hinman tells them, like, as soon as you leave, I am calling the fucking cops. And I'm telling them everything I know about you guys. Like, all the drugs, everything that's ever happened, I'm going to tell them all of it. So they call Charlie and they tell him, like, hey, he's going to call the cops if we leave. So Charlie just tells him, like, well, then you know what you got to do. And he gives them some additional instructions. So the Black Panthers...
To kill him, pretty much.
Well, the Black Panthers used to have a symbol of a black paw print that they would put on certain things, right? So Bobby decides to stab Hinman to death to accomplish the goal of murdering him.
What the fuck?
Which he does. Then he uses Hinman's blood to make a paw print on the wall and writes "Political Piggy" near it in Hinman's blood. He's thinking that this will cause people to blame the Black Panthers and spark Helter Skelter once again. The group then goes through the entire home, tries to get rid of all their fingerprints, then takes the 2 cars that have been signed over to them, and they leave. They waited to hear on the news something about the murder, but after 2 days go by, they don't hear anything. Like, nothing. So
did they not kill him?
So Manson's like, Bobby, like, go back there and make sure he's dead. So Bobby goes back to see if anyone's discovered it. And in his own words, he describes how the sound of maggots eating this guy's flesh, because he is indeed dead, somehow just like unnerved him and kind of like woke him up to what had happened. And he sees the bloody paw print that he left on the wall, and he immediately becomes convinced they're going to figure out it was me because of that. So he tries to wipe it off. But because the blood is dried, he can't. So he's just like, fuck. So he leaves. Hinman's discovered on July 31st, but again, it does not trigger Helter Skelter. Charlie has a huge problem. He predicted that the world is about to end and the family's waiting for it to happen. And now it's August, man. Like, the world is not cooperating with Charlie Manson's bizarre prophecy. So because of this, he decides that they need to spark it themselves, that what they've done already hasn't done it. So on August 8th, 1969, he lets the family think that Bobby is going to go to jail. They're obviously going to catch Bobby. That's why they're not hearing anything about it on the news. And somehow, because he's excellent at manipulating people, he lets the family develop the idea that he plants in their head of, if they just murder more people, it'll cover Bobby's tracks. So he lets Tex, which is his number 2 in command, step up, and he guides him to think of a target. And of course, he talks about places that only him and Tex have been, which eventually leads Tex to think of Terry Melcher's place. They should go to Terry Melcher. Terry Melcher was the asshole who wouldn't give them this deal and let Charlie be famous. Yeah. It's clearly that guy's fault. And even though they're completely aware he does not live there anymore, they figure someone famous must live there, so that's what we're going to fucking do. We're going to Terry Melcher's place, and that's who we're going to kill. And I say they, and I only mean Charlie and Tex at this point. And Tex was fucked up on acid and meth at the time, so he was very easily influenced. And Charlie orders Tex, Susan Atkins, Pat Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian to go to Terry Melcher's house, and he tells them, quote, do something witchy, which Tex knew to mean something similar to what had been done at the killing from Hinman's, which is to write shit on the wall.
That's fucked up.
He wants, like, Tex knows he wants them to die, but he also wants them to write something on the wall. So Susan kind of knows this too. She pays attention, but the 2 other girls aren't really sure what's going to happen. They're not sure if they're going there to do another creepy crawly. The last time they went out and did a creepy crawly was like less than a week ago, and they went with Tex, and they stole shit and brought it back, so maybe they're going to go do that. They're told to bring their knives, which was a pretty normal thing, because they all had knives. And Pat forgets to bring hers. She's like, oh, fuck, I forgot mine. But I'm already in the car, whatever. So they take off. And they're just back there whispering because they're not exactly sure what's going to happen. Before they leave, Charlie gives Tex a .22 caliber bunt-line revolver, which is a very rare revolver, along with a few other items. And Tex had been instructed to use the revolver as a, quote, last resort. So along the drive, Tex is not speaking at all. He does not say a word, which is kind of unnerving because they figured they would discuss what's going to happen when they get there. Upon arriving, Tex climbs up a telephone pole and cuts some wires that apparently connected the main house to the guest cottage. Then he gets back in the car, backs it all the way down the hill.
How does he know that?
I don't know. I guess Charlie told him that's like what the best thing would be to do. So he backs the car all the way down the hill, and he tells the girls, like, grab your shit. He grabs the gun, he tucks it behind his belt, and then he grabs like 3 feet of... No, it's actually way more than that. It's like 9, 10, 12 feet of rope. And they start heading up the hill. And they get to the gate, and they start scaling the gate. So at that time, a friend of the person who lives in the guest house by the name of William Garrettson is departing. So Steve Parent was saying his goodbyes, and he leaves. And as they're discussing like just random bullshit at the door, they hear the neighbor's dog start barking. And the neighbor's dog had a very specific bark when it heard people. And so William Garrettson notices it, and he tells Steve Parent, like, that's its people bark. And they both assume they've woken up the dog, and the dog's barking at them from having the conversation in the doorway. So they say their goodbyes, and Steve Parent leaves. At this time, Steve Parent's leaving, Tex and the girls have cleared the gate and are now on the other side. Once they reach the other side, Tex tells them they're going up to the house that Terry Melcher used to live in, and they're going to kill everybody inside.
That's so fucked,
And
dude.
because they're all so programmed to just do whatever Charlie said, and they were told before they left, Charlie told them, do whatever Tex tells you. They're like, okay. Like they were being told they were going to go on a leisurely walk or a stroll. Like they just agree to it. And they start heading up the driveway. And as they're heading up, they see a car backing down. Or I'm sorry, it's a car coming down the driveway, and it's Steve Parent's. They dive into the bushes, and at this point, Steve Parent's just approaching to leave, And he rolls his window down to press the button for the gate, and as he rolls the window down, Tex comes out of the bushes. And this is the quote that I got from the book that I've been referencing. He tries to shout at Tex, quote, please don't hurt me. I'm your friend. I won't tell. And then Tex repeatedly slashes Steve Parent with his knife, cutting him across his arms as he's trying to protect himself and defend himself. He incidentally cuts off Parent's wristwatch. He's slashing at him so hard. Because Steve Parent is defending himself well enough, Tex then takes out the revolver and shoots Steve Parent 4 times at point-blank range, killing him.
Oh my gosh.
Neighbors around the place would wake up to the sound, but after listening for a little bit of time, decide there was no other noises. It may have been gunshots, but they go back to sleep. I couldn't help but think, like, why wouldn't they call the police? Like, who?
Just send the police.
Who wouldn't call
anyway.
the police?
Yeah.
But, like, we hear stuff all the time. We assume it's fireworks. And even when I used to live in, like, a bad neighborhood where I would hear gunshots on occasion, I didn't even call the police back then. I'd check the time and be like, if tomorrow I hear that something fucked up happened, I'll be like, oh, like, I was awake at that time. I totally heard that gunshot. And there is a nearby security guard in a local area who hears the shots, and they call the police. And during the time they're filing the report, he admits that the geography of the location, because they're in this canyon, like, it plays hell with determining directions of where sounds come from. And he has no idea where the sound came from, but he knows he heard 3 or 4 gunshots. And the person taking the report at the police station tells him, quote, I hope we don't have a murder. And then they send no one out to investigate it because they don't even know where to send the police at this point. So they get a report, but there's just nothing they can do. So Tex and the girls then move Steve Parent's car down to where the gate is, and then they walk up towards the house. Now, inside the house is Wojciech Frykowski, Abigail Folger, the heiress of the Folger Coffee Corporation, Jay Sebring, and Sharon Tate, who was, at the time, 8.5 months pregnant. Linda is told to check for unlocked doors or windows. So here's the first sign that there is someone with them that does not want to do this. So, having seen Steve be killed must have unnerved Linda. And when we watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, remember someone says, oh, I left my knife, and they go back to the car and they bail?
Yeah.
That's supposedly Linda.
Okay.
So, when they get there, Tex says, like, go search the house, look for any open windows or doors. She finds an open window that's been cracked to allow paint inside to dry. And when she looks in, she can see that it's a recently painted room. It's the nursery.
Oh.
They just painted the nursery that day, and they're letting the paint dry. Linda returns to Tex, and she tells Tex, like, nope, it's all locked up tight.
Wow.
Because she does not want to do this. And Tex spots an open window at the front of the house that's behind a screen, and he tells Linda, look, go down to the gate and be the lookout. So once
she's gone. She's like, fuck
he
this,
dismisses her to the gate to be the lookout, and then Tex, Pat, and Susan go inside the house. The first person they come across in the living room is Wojciech, who is asleep on the couch. Tex tells Susan to head down the hallway towards the bedrooms. Wojciech wakes up, and he's like, coming to, like, who are you? And so Tex kicks him in the head as hard as he can, and when he begins to start asking more questions, Tex tells him, quote, I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business. Which I'm pretty sure is the same line that's used in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That's what he says to Brad Pitt when Brad Pitt's all fucked up on acid. So,
oh my god, I would watch that movie again.
Wojciech tries to speak again, and Tex tells him, quote, another word and you're dead. At this point, he motions for Pat to explore the house as well as Susan, and Pat realizes she doesn't have her fucking knife, you know? They've broken in, they've woke this dude up, and she needs her knife. She didn't bring it. So she goes outside, goes down the driveway to the gate, and asks Linda, hey, can I borrow your knife? So Linda gives her a knife, like, here you go. She goes back in there. At the time she's doing this to go fetch the knife, Susan walks down the hallway, and there's an open door, and in the bedroom reading is Abigail Folger, who looks up and sees this girl she doesn't recognize, but because, like, they always left the doors unlocked, and they had so many folks that would stop by randomly, she sees this chick, she sees Susan Atkins, and, like, waves at her.
Wow.
Like, hey, you look nice. Like, you must be a friend of someone's. And Susan waves back at her. And then just keeps going down the hallway. And she gets to the bedroom that has Jay and Sharon in there. And they're just in there talking about, like, super deep things. She's about to have a kid. That's not shocking. They're having a serious conversation. And she, like, peeks in. They don't notice her because they're so engrossed in conversation. And she walks back to the living room where Tex is. She walks past the open door that has Abigail in the bedroom. She waves at her again on her way back to the living room. So Tex orders her to bring everyone to the living room. So she goes back to Abigail, and Abigail looks up, still not thinking there's anything wrong. And this time, Susan pulls out her knife and tells her to go to the living room, and she complies. She goes to the room with Sharon and Jay, who now notice her, and she tells them, quote, "Come with me, don't say a word, or you're dead." They all gather in the living room, and at this point, I will issue the first trigger warning for you folks. I'm not going to get into super gruesome details on this, but I am going to describe essentially what did happen here, because it is the Manson family murders, and it's really, really fucked up. So here we go. I'm going to go into it. I'd say skip ahead about like maybe 2-3 minutes if you don't want to hear this. They tie Frykowski's hands behind his back. They have the rope, but they are told, Tex tells Susan to do it and tells her to use a towel. She has trouble tying a knot, but she finally gets it done. They then sit down Jay and Sharon in back-to-back chairs, and they tie the rope around Jay's neck. They then throw the rope over a beam on the ceiling, and they tie the other end around Sharon Tate's neck. At this point, when Jay's realizing how fucked up this is, Jay is like freaking out, and he's like, "Can't you see she's pregnant? Like, what is wrong with you fucking people?" You know, what he says is, "Can't you see she's pregnant?" And Sharon Tate starts crying. Tex then shoots Jay in the stomach.
Oh my God.
And he collapses on the floor. They then demand money. Charlie also mentioned bring back whatever cash they have in the house. They're rich. They must have a lot. There's only $70 in the home. So Tex is fucking furious. They're trying to explain to him, like, they don't keep cash in the house. Sharon says, like, "I can get more money if you give me time. I can get whatever money you need." She's married to Roman Polanski at the time. She's like, "I'm sure we can figure something out." But Tex is super pissed. So he just jumps on top of Jay Sebring and stabs him to death on the floor in front of everyone.
After he was already shot.
After he's already shot. He just, because he hears Jay groaning on the floor because he's not dead yet. So then one of the people who's watching this happen, whether it's Abigail or Frycheck or Sharon Tate, asks, like, "What are you going to do to us?" And so Tex tells them, quote, "You're all going to die." And Frykowski hears that, and he's bound by a towel, and he's able to break free from it because the knot is not very tight. And so Susan jumps on him and tries to start stabbing him, and he's fighting with Susan. And he's mainly getting stabbed in the legs because he's overpowering her, but she's just stabbing as hard as she can. Linda down at the gate can hear Frykowski screaming while he's being stabbed because he's in so much pain. So she starts walking back up the house to see, like, what the fuck's going on? How bad is this? And so Frykowski breaks away from Susan, even though he's been stabbed so much, and gets out the front of the house into the front yard. Susan and Tex get a hold of him. He fights back, but he eventually does succumb to his wounds, and he dies in the front yard. He is stabbed and shot and beaten with the gun to finally subdue him. And this is important. I'm not just saying this because it's morbid. Like, the fact that he's beaten with the gun is a big deal, because when you hit someone with the butt of a gun, it can do damage to the gun, which it does, which is very, very important in the next episode. So Linda sees Frykowski's last moments after walking up the driveway to see, like, what the fuck's going on. She's just horrified. It's like, this is the thing that really breaks her. She then tells Tex, quote, "Please make it stop. People are coming." Frykowski was stabbed a total of 51 times.
Wow.
And hit by the gun 13 separate times. And after the analysis, it looks like those were all done while he was alive. Linda hasn't seen anyone yet. She just lies because she's so horrified at what's happening. She just wants it to stop. So at this point, Folger breaks away from Pat inside and attempts to run away. She runs out the front door and makes it to the yard before Pat tackles her and repeatedly stabs her. After repeatedly stabbing her, she calls over Tex to confirm that she's actually dead. And he notices that Pat is kind of shaken up because the act of actually murdering someone has kind of shaken Pat loose from her, like,
delusion,
mind control, or, like, what do they call it? Brainwashing. And so she's, like, shaking visibly. So Tex tells her, go check the guest house and, quote, kill whoever is in there. And this is where William Garrettson is. His friend Steve Parent's already been murdered. These people are all getting murdered at Sharon Tate's house. And he sends Pat over there to check the house and kill who's ever in there. Pat is so shaken at this point, she walks over to the guest house and collects herself because she knows that if she doesn't do what Tex says, he's going to kill her. They're all afraid that if Charles Manson finds out that they didn't do what Tex said, Charles will be upset, and then he'll make Tex punish them or even kill them. So she walks over there. She knows Tex can't see her. She walks back after never checking the house, and she tells him the house is empty. There's no one in there. She doesn't want to do this shit anymore.
Who was in? Was there anyone?
William Garrettson was in. I just said that. William Garrettson is in there. This is the reason why William Garrettson is not killed. Tex is stabbing Folger to finish her off because she actually wasn't dead yet. And they go back inside except Linda, who's still outside. At this point, the only person who's still alive is Sharon Tate, who is begging them not to kill her for the sake of her unborn child. She tells them they can take her as a hostage and just kill her after she has her kid, but please God, let her kid live. And they don't listen because Charles Manson didn't say to delay any killings. He wanted maximum publicity. So she is stabbed a total of 16 times before she dies. Some folks say Susan stabbed her. Some say Tex while Susan held her. Some say both of them stabbed her. The story changes multiple times from Susan and Tex in the future of who actually stabs her. Susan does admit she was the one who takes Sharon's blood and writes pig on the front door before they leave. So, another trigger warning. This one's really quick. Skip ahead 30 seconds. It is said that Susan Atkins actually intended to cut Sharon Tate's unborn child from her, but did not do that due to Linda's urging that people were coming. The fact that Linda was lying to them saying, like, people are coming, we need to leave, is the reason that she thought they didn't have enough time to do it. So they just leave her there with 14 stab wounds, and she's dead when they leave. On the way out, as they're walking down the driveway, Tex pushes the button to open the gate. Tex leaves behind a bloody fingerprint on the button. The four then retreat from the home and down the hill, getting back in the car. They have a change of clothes, and as soon as they've changed, they pull to the side of the road and ditch the clothes that they were wearing during the murder, along with the weapons, off the steep side of the highway. At 8 a.m. the next morning, Winifred Chapman arrives for work and discovers the bodies of her employers. The police come to the scene and form the initial suspicion and conclusion that because there was weed at the scene, and there was so much of it, this must have been some form of drug deal that's gone wrong. It then occurs to them to check and see if anyone in the guest house is alive. William Garrettson is in there sleeping. He didn't hear any of this shit happen. So they kick in his door, they drag him out of there as the primary suspect, and they think there's no way it could have been anyone else at this point. He had to have heard it, and the fact that he's saying he didn't hear it, he didn't know what happened, means he obviously did it. The officer who breaks down his door and drags him out tells him he doesn't care while he's pleading his innocence. He's dragging him down the driveway. William Garrettson sees Stephen Parent's body, and it's so badly injured he doesn't even recognize him. The officer dragging him down, whose name is Jerry DeRosa, tells him to shut up. He doesn't believe him. He tells people, like, I have the guy, things like that. Like, he's just assuming, like, I caught the guy already, like, I'm a hero, you know?
Yeah.
He drags him down the driveway. He opens the gate, presses the fucking button, and gets rid of the bloody fingerprint that was left behind by Tex. That evidence is completely removed by this cop. It's all over the news. Details of the murders and the writing in blood gets out. People are demanding answers almost immediately. They want to know who's been killed. Eventually, it leaks out the identity to the victims, and at this time, Garrettson is basically being treated as if he's completely responsible. It's open and shut. He's referred to as the guy who did it multiple times.
I would fucking sue the shit out of them.
The kid's just fucking traumatized because he's realizing all these people were murdered, and one of the things he asks is, like, why wasn't I murdered, you know?
Yeah.
So, no one connects the writings on the wall as Charles Manson had intended. He's trying to bring about this race war, and nothing is working. People just believe that these are just separate killings, especially the police. So Charlie, being frustrated, decides they need to go back out the next night and do it again. And this time, Charlie goes with. He takes the four from the night before, along with Leslie Van Houten, I think, and Clem Grogan. And they go to a house that is directly next to a home they had been the year prior. They went to this house for a party. He remembered the house next door and decided that's where we're going to go and kill people. It seems completely arbitrary the way he's picking people now. He has the family wait in the car while he goes into the house by himself. Later on, Tex stated that Tex actually went with Charles Manson into the home, but he let people think Charlie went inside so that he was less accountable. Tex and Charlie wound up going in the house, and they wake up Leno and Rosemary LaBianca at gunpoint, and they bind their hands behind them. They place pillowcases on their head, and then they take nearby lamps, and they wrap the cords around their necks to bind the pillowcases to their head. They put Rosemary in the bedroom, and they keep Leno in the living room. They then return outside to the rest of the family, where Charlie issues the order to go inside and kill the couple to Tex, Leslie, and Pat. Charles Manson, Linda, Clem, and Susan would leave at this point, and he instructed the remaining family members to murder the couple and then hitchhike back to the ranch. So with Leno in the living room and Rosemary in the bedroom, Tex uses a bayonet he brought with him, and he begins stabbing Leno. The first stab is in the neck. Rosemary somehow struggles free, despite the fact that Pat and Leslie are watching over her. Tex has to stop his assault on Leno and help subdue Rosemary, who's keeping them at bay with the lamp she's been bound with. She somehow got a hold of it and is using it like a lance to back them up. So he's able to help subdue Rosemary, then he returns to go finish killing Leno. He is stabbed 12 times by Tex, and then an additional 14 times by Pat, who has apparently regained her nerve since the night before, who then writes "Rise" and "Death to the Pigs." Death to pigs on the walls in blood. She also writes "Helter Skelter" spelled incorrectly on the refrigerator door. Leno also had the word "war" carved into his abdomen. Pat and Leslie then stab Rosemary to death. In total, she is stabbed 41 times. The majority of the stab wounds were determined to have happened after she died. She presumably died at the hands of Pat, who began stabbing her first. Tex then insisted Leslie also stab her, kind of trying to make her as culpable as everyone else, because at that point she had just been witnessing it. So when this all hits the fan, Leslie does state that, like, she did not take this woman's life. She only stabbed her after she was dead so that she herself wouldn't be killed, because she's, again, it's crazy because they all say, despite the fact that Tex is there, they're just afraid of Charlie. Like, if Charlie finds out I didn't do what he wanted, I'm gonna get punished, or I'm gonna get killed.
Why would they
and they're
follow
all
someone,
terrified of it.
Like,
I don't think it's really clicked in their head how much power he has over them until they are, like, face to face with the fact that they're murdering someone because he said so. Until then, it's just been like, we're all fucking, and we're all high, and we're breaking into people's houses.
So, I mean, I know I'm skipping to next episode, but I know during the trial, they're all, like, together. All the girls are, like, teamed up together.
Well, it's like, after these horrible things happen, they, again, regain their nerve.
Oh.
You know, they're like, oh, well, I guess Charlie is right. But, well, again, we'll get to that next week. So, on the way home, though, Charles Manson tells Linda Kasabian to drive to the home of another intended victim. They're going to kill another person on this night.
Oh, my gosh.
And it's some, like, not well-known actor. I couldn't find the name of this person that was the intended victim, that Linda herself was familiar with more than anyone else. She was actually the only one who knew where he lived. So they get to his apartment. They all get out. Charlie tells them, go kill that guy, and hitchhike back to the ranch. He gets in the car, and he fucking leaves. So now it's Linda, Susan, and Clem at this guy's house. And they walk upstairs, like, to get to the second floor, apparently, of the apartment building this guy lived in. And Linda deliberately goes to the wrong door and knocks and wakes up a stranger. So when the stranger comes to the door, the stranger is loud and angry and scolds them for waking him up. And the group then gets the door basically slammed in their face. They talk and realize, like, they really can't commit the crime now unless they also murder the stranger who they just woke up and made noise for scolding them. Linda also says, like, well, if he doesn't live there, I don't know if he still lives here anymore, and offers a bunch of excuses. They decide they basically have to bail on this murder. So Linda prevents this one from happening simply because she knocks on the wrong door.
Kind of like the other one who didn't want to go knock on the guest house door.
Yeah, but she had already committed a murder. So at this point, Linda's just like, I don't want to be a fucking part of this, but I'm so stuck in this now, I don't know what to do. So the group then decides we can't do it, and we have to leave. We have to hitchhike home. So, on the way out, Susan Atkins, just to be Susan, decides to shit on the stairwell. So, she does that, and they leave. The LaBiancas are found the next morning, and the police arrive to the gruesome scene. The media hears of the killings, and details again leak out, and the press and the people of the city immediately assume these murders are connected. The LAPD insists, based off of evidence collected at both of these murder scenes, that they aren't connected because obviously the Tate murder was the result of a drug deal gone bad or a drug dealer coming to murder them because they had marijuana. This was their secondary theory initially, which has now become their primary theory due to two facts. The first is that their suspect number one, William Garrettson, who was the guy who done it up until then, took a polygraph test while he was in their custody, which showed that he was not involved in the killings at all. And at that point, they put so much stock in those polygraph tests, they were basically like, oh, I guess it wasn't him. Polygraph tests are no longer admissible as evidence, just FYI. The second fact is that the crimes are similar. They can't deny it. It's very obvious. But William Garrettson was in their custody at the time of the second killings, you know?
Yeah.
So clearly, he wasn't the person who did the second one, and now they don't even think he's the one who did the first one. At this point, they're convinced they're searching for a drug dealer or drug dealers that either committed a crime against Sharon Tate or have done both of these crimes, and now they're calling it a ritualistic murder because there's so much about it that seems bizarre.
It does seem ritualistic, though,
it
how
is
they're doing
it. It very much is, but it's kind of improvised, you know? They do not suspect Charles Manson or the Manson family at all at this point in time. It's really easy to think of these murders and think, oh yeah, the Manson family did it, you know? But if you imagine this happening August 10th, 1969, at that point in time, these things are being discovered, and all that is known is that quite a few people are dead in horrific ways, and no one at all knows what happened at all. They don't know who to blame, and the press and the citizens of the like really the country, not just the city, are demanding answers at
Not
this point.
everyone knows Charlie Manson exists.
Barely
either,
anyone
right?
knows Charles Manson exists, you know? Like, no one would suspect that these, like, free-loving hippies are behind, like, some of the most gruesome murders of all time. So at this point, they know two things, really. One, whoever's doing this is still at large, and two, they have no idea who they are. So it's a very terrifying time, August 10th of 1969. So how will they catch Charles Manson and the Manson family? Find out next time on Scaryish.
Was that the end?
Yeah, that's the end.
Wow.
So I'll give you a quick preview. This is one of the most baffling things I did not know about this case that I recently learned. So the murder weapon winds up being found by a child. That child winds up telling his dad, who calls the police. They then turn over this murder weapon, right? It's collected by the police, and it is then thrown away. And the reason given is, quote, not every report and weapon can be followed up on. So it delays the investigation so significantly. But we'll get to that next time on Scaryish. So this was probably the most intense episode I've ever researched.
Yeah, nice.
And I hope you all dealt with it. I know everyone's a huge true crime fan, but when you get into like the gruesome details, especially of murder, I understand people like wanting to skip ahead a little bit. So hopefully the trigger warnings helped you a little bit with that. But that's everything I have for the Manson Family Murders, Part 2. Part 3 will be the final installment where we're going to go over how they caught them, the crimes that unfolded after these crimes to try and cover up what happened, and the trial, which has some of the most batshit crazy stuff you can ever imagine from people who are in charge of, like, you know, administering justice, and how they kind of tried to block that from happening because it's like supposedly their job. It's going to get batshit crazy here in episode 3, so I hope you tune in next week.
Cool.
But, yeah, that's everything I got for episode 133. If anyone has a story they would like to share with us, typically paranormal, but you can do true crime, anything that you think is spooky or creepy, maybe experience that's happened to you, a friend, a family member, please email us.
Or like if you have a relative who happened to run into Charles Manson or something sometime in their life, that's cool too.
I saw someone tweet, like, my dad used to work with Ted Bundy, and every Friday when they were leaving, he'd say, see you Monday, Bundy. And I can't imagine how often Ted Bundy must have thought about murdering my father. So, like, stuff like that, like bizarre run-ins, please let us know. We'd love to read those in our Storytime episodes. Email storytime@scaryish.com, or go to our website, scaryish.com, and click on Contact Us and fill out that form. Or hit us up on any of our social medias. Let us know that we can share it, and we'd be more than happy to do so. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scaryish-podcast. Those are monthly donations, whole bunch of different tiers to check out. This season's Badge of Honor tiers are getting like a Mothman keychain that I designed, so that's kind of cool if you guys want to get your hands on that. You can also go to ko-fi.com/scaryish-podcast. Those are one-time donations. All your donations go to upgrading our studio setup and helping us just keep the podcast going and living, and yeah.
Yeah, so that's everything we have for episode 133, so go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.